They are calling it Test Flight 1 again. Think about that for a second. After 11 flights, after years of explosions and triumphs, after rockets that climbed into the sky and rockets that tore themselves apart over the ocean, the most experienced launch team on Earth looked at what they were about to do and decided it was worth starting the count over from the beginning. Because this time, almost nothing is the same. For the first time, a completely new machine is flying as one. Not a tweaked version of the last rocket, not an old booster with a few new parts bolted on. An entirely new vehicle from the engines at its base to the heat shield wrapping its skin. A clean sheet, a fresh start, and the men and women who built it know exactly what that means. When everything is new, everything is a question, and the only place those questions get answered is in the air. The chief engineer said it plainly. This is essentially the first flight all over again, where so many new components are working together for the very first time. No simulation can truly tell you what happens when all of it fires at once. You can model it, predict it, dream about it, but until the clamps release and the ground starts to shake, you don't really know. This is the story of that machine, and the impossibly narrow path it has to fly. Start at the heart of it with the engines. The new Raptor engine is the boldest thing this company has ever attempted, and the strange part is that its boldness shows up as simplicity. The earlier versions were beautiful in a complicated way, wrapped in plumbing and wiring and clusters of sensors like a body with all its veins on the outside. The new one strips almost all of that away. By leaning hard into advanced manufacturing, especially 3D printing, the engineers melted away the external clutter and folded it into the engine itself. It isn't just about looking cleaner. Fewer parts means fewer things that can break, less weight to carry. A machine that is, by its very nature, tougher. They even managed to delete the dedicated heat shield each engine used to need, shaving off more weight while making it more durable at the same time. Better cooling, higher efficiency. Every engine now both stronger and harder to kill. Now scale that up. 33 of these engines sit clustered at the base of the booster. Fire them together and the total thrust climbs to somewhere around 9,200 tons. Numbers like that stop meaning anything to the human mind. It is simply more raw power than anything that has ever tried to leave this planet on a regular basis. But here is the thing the team will tell you if you ask. The power was never really the point. The point is consistency. After building and flying hundreds of the older engines, they are chasing something far more ambitious than brute force. They want to industrialize the rocket engine. They want it built in large numbers, flown, recovered, and flown again with barely a glance, more like the jet engine under an airliner's wing than the precious, hand-inspected machinery of old space. That is why this flight matters so much. It will be the first time all 39 engines, 33 on the booster and 6 on the ship, breathe fire together on a real mission. And if that weren't enough, they plan to push further still, relighting engines out in space, a small miracle of control that future missions will depend on completely. If it works, it opens the door to everything that comes next, including the breathtaking idea of catching a rocket out of the sky. And if it fails, the data will still be priceless, pouring straight into the next version of the machine. The engines are only the beginning. The whole vehicle has been redrawn from scratch. The booster is taller now, its propellant tanks stretched, its oxygen section grown larger so it can hold more fuel and squeeze out more performance. But size was never the obsession, control was. Look closely and you'll notice something that seems backward. The booster used to have 4 steering fins near its top. Now it has 3. At first that sounds like a step down, like they removed something important. It's the opposite. 3 fins change the way the booster falls back through the atmosphere, giving it a longer, more graceful gliding angle on its way home. It trades a little stubborn stability for something far more valuable, the ability to fly itself back with finesse. There's more hidden in the details. The hot staging ring, that critical piece where the ship separates from the booster, used to be a separate structure perched on top. Now it's built directly into the booster's nose, woven in rather than stacked on. A small thing, almost invisible, but it tells you everything about the philosophy driving this machine. Fewer parts, tighter integration, nothing carried that doesn't need to be there. That same idea runs through the entire rocket. Both have stripped down to weigh less while somehow growing stronger. And when you marry that lighter, tougher body to those more powerful new engines, the payoff is dramatic. The amount of cargo this ship can carry to orbit and bring back has nearly tripled compared to earlier hopes, climbing toward 100 tons. Throw away reusability and let it fly one way, and that number could go even higher. But none of it matters if the ship can't survive the way home. Re-entry is the cruelest problem in all of rocketry. Coming back into the atmosphere isn't a gentle descent. It's a controlled fall through a wall of fire, the air itself compressing into glowing plasma that wants to melt anything it touches. To survive it once is hard. To survive it again and again, the way an airliner survives every flight, is the holy grail. So they went back to the heat shield. They redesigned the very shape of the tiles, reworking the geometry and the way the tiles fit together, closing the tiny gaps where heat used to sneak through and gnaw at the stainless steel underneath. And they changed how the tiles are attached, because in earlier flights, tiles cracked and tore loose at the worst possible moments. The new method is meant to grip the hull far more stubbornly, holding fast through the violent shaking of launch and the brutal expansion of re-entry heat. The goal is simple to say and agonizing to achieve. Let the ship plunge into that fire, drive through the plasma using its control fins, survive intact, then flip into its strange and beautiful belly flop before settling down for a soft landing. A heat shield that does its job cleanly also means less repair work between flights, and less repair work means flying more often, which is the entire dream. A real transport system to space, lofting satellites by the dozen, carrying people to the moon, eventually to Mars. And that dream has a final piece, one designed into the machine from the very first sketch: the ability to refuel in space. Built right into the vehicle is the hardware to dock with another ship in orbit and transfer fuel, methane and oxygen from one to the other. It sounds almost mundane until you understand what it unlocks. It turns the ship into a gas station floating in the dark. A spacecraft can launch nearly empty, then fill its tanks once it's already in space, suddenly able to travel far beyond anything a single launch could ever manage. Without this, the moon stays out of reach. With it, the moon becomes a destination. But a machine this ambitious needs a launch site just as ambitious to send it on its way. That's where the new pad comes in, built from the ground up for this generation of rocket. Its most radical feature is the water system that floods the ground at the moment of liftoff. Old systems leaned on tanks of high-pressure gas to push that water. This one uses small rocket engine cores of its own, burning the same methane and oxygen the rocket burns, generating pressure on demand and driving water through the system at flow rates many times higher than before. 3 separate generators feed it. A large one for the flame trench beneath the rocket, a medium one for the launch mount, and a smaller one to cool the upper structure. Together they unleash a colossal curtain of water beneath the rocket, swallowing the heat and absorbing the punishing wall of sound that 33 engines hurl at the ground all at once. And like everything else here, the goal isn't only protection, it's speed. A faster, smarter ground system that shaves precious minutes off the fueling clock, because in the end this is all about cadence, about flying again and again without rest. So now picture the flight itself. It will still be a suborbital hop, not yet a full lap around the Earth. But it carries equipment to stress test the new structure under the weight of a simulated payload to see whether all this new engineering holds up under real conditions and not just on paper. And the path it flies is the most nerve-wracking part of all. After lifting off from the new pad, the ship will arc out over the Gulf and then enter a corridor so tight it leaves almost no room to breathe. It threads between Mexico's Yucatan and Cuba through a gap of only 80 to 120 nautical miles, a gap that demands almost perfect guidance. From there, it gets harder still. The trajectory slips between the Cayman Islands and Jamaica, then crosses the island shared by Haiti and the Dominican Republic, before finally breaking free into the open Atlantic. It's a route with no forgiveness in it, and that's precisely the point. It is a test of whether the ship can hold its line under real-world pressure with land and people on either side. After a little over an hour of flight, it will perform its signature belly flop and come down for a controlled splashdown in the Indian Ocean, off the coast of Australia, halfway around the world from where it began. The flight will tilt to an angle that mirrors the paths future missions will actually need, the same kind of angle required to deploy satellites or one day to reach the Moon and Mars. This is the last stepping stone before the next flight finally reaches for a stable orbit. So why choose a path this tight, this stomach-turning? Nothing about it was random, it was a careful calculation. First, safety. The corridor is so narrow that if the rocket tears itself apart, the wreckage falls into empty stretches of sea rather than onto crowded islands. If the ship strays even slightly from its safe lane, the flight termination system ends it instantly. The route also keeps the rocket clear of the busy skies full of airliners around the region. But safety alone doesn't explain why the path is so demanding. The second reason is rehearsal. This is a dress rehearsal for the real thing, a chance to practice the exact speeds and angles needed for future satellite deployment, and to practice the return path that will one day let the booster come home and be caught at the tower without circling the entire planet first. As for timing, it lines up the way these things always do, with a little friction. Early notices pointed to a window in the middle of May, then slipped a few days later as the schedule breathed. That delay surprised no one. The booster had already gone through static fire attempts that were cut short not by the engines but by trouble on the ground systems. Before anyone commits to flight, the team will want another test fire, this time hopefully a full one. After that comes the careful choreography. The booster rolled out to the pad, stacked with the ship for a full rehearsal with fuel loaded but engines silent, more integrated testing. Then the delicate, deadly serious work of installing and arming the flight termination hardware, the system that exists only to destroy the rocket if everything goes wrong. Final checks, last-minute adjustments, maybe an engine swapped, maybe a setting tuned. The vehicle restacked one final time. And then, at last, execution, every system verified. The termination system confirmed armed, a green light running straight across the board. After that, there is nothing left to do but light the engines and watch a brand new machine answer the only question that ever really mattered. Will it fly?